I've been getting closer to my stepson lately, something I never imagined would happen. I became a divorcee just a year into my marriage. It turned out my ex-husband had been seeing someone else all along, and I was the only one in the dark. He had been with his girlfriend for a long time, but his family opposed their relationship. Unaware of all this, I happily went ahead with the marriage. I never snooped on his phone when we were dating. It just seemed natural for a man and woman of marriageable age to meet and start a family. However, problems started surfacing during our honeymoon. My husband kept stepping out, and when he returned after a while, his expression was bitter. I would have understood if he just went out for a smoke, but his demeanor was unusually gloomy for a newlywed, and he wasn't affectionate towards me at all. It turned out he had another woman, and he was in contact with her not only on our wedding day, but also the days following. I confronted him quietly, asking if this was how he intended to live, questioning if anyone could see him as a man who had just started a new family. He was indifferent. "Yeah, I don't think I can forget her." He agreed to a divorce without any fuss, and without any regrets, I packed my bags and left. Since then, I had trouble trusting men. Although it's gotten better, there was a tendency to look down on divorcees. So, I never mentioned that I was a divorcee or that I lived alone unless asked. I didn't open up about my situation unless someone inquired. But there was something different about the man I was introduced to later. At least, he didn't seem like he would cause trouble over another woman. I met him in my early 40s. He was raising a college-aged son. His son was also gentle and handsome. When I got divorced, I was in my late 20s, a time when many of my college friends were getting married and starting families. Looking back, I experienced both marriage and divorce during what many consider the prime years of one's life. It wasn't until over a decade later, in my early 40s, that I met my current husband. He was a divorced man raising his son alone. His voice alone conveyed his kindness, and he had a friendly and welcoming demeanor. However, I soon discovered that, much like my first husband, he had a weakness for the attention of other women. This repeated issue caused me considerable stress, leading me to regret my decision to remarry. Despite my disappointment in my second husband's inability to resist other women, I found solace in my stepson, who respectfully called me Mom and did not follow in his father's footsteps. He was a bright college student, cheerful and insightful, which made me proud of how well he was raised, seemingly in spite of his father's example. Initially, our relationship was somewhat awkward, since I became his stepmother when he was a freshman in college. However, he grew on me as he shared memories while looking through photo albums, watched TV with me, and prepared late-night snacks when his father came home late. His attentive behavior made me feel wanted in the household, and over time, my fondness for him evolved, confusingly seeing him as more than just a stepson. Despite these feelings, I reminded myself of the impossibility of them. As a successful freelancer, I was financially independent and didn't need to rely on a man, but I couldn't bear the thought of hurting my stepson, who had come to see me as a mother figure. My son once mentioned while looking through an album, "Mom left us for some reason when I was deep in my teenage years." He still doesn't understand why his mom decided to divorce. It was clear he craved a stable family environment, and I could see his lips quiver slightly when he spoke about his mom. Knowing how much he longed for her presence, I thought it was right to divorce my current husband, but I decided to hang in there a bit longer. From the day I visited, my son held my hand and said, "Mom, let's get along well," which was both touching and heart-wrenching. Despite being an adult, he still harbored insecurities, and I resolved to make our relationship work. My husband's constant late nights caused a lot of stress, and I grew tired of bringing up his issues and arguing. His blatant late returns became more frequent, to the point where I no longer saw him as a partner. When my son applied for a student exchange program and began studying languages, I felt I had no reason to stay in this house without him, yet the thought of him leaving was deeply saddening. I couldn't get angry at my husband's insincere late returns anymore, but I couldn't bear to hurt my son, who chatted away beside me as I prepared meals. I decided to foster a closer relationship with my son, and oddly enough, alcohol played its part well. As my son got busy with language school, I made special snacks to encourage him. "Son, let's have a beer." "I've got wedge fries today," I said, and he came running in light clothes, massaging my shoulders. We spent the night together until late, while my husband was away on a supposed on-night, 2-day workshop, which I hardly cared whether was true or not. Being remarried and lying alone in a large bed felt lonely, but spending time with my son felt truly wonderful. He said in a shy voice, "Mom, this is a first for me, too," which I replied, "Mom doesn't know much about men either, just got older," as I stroked his back. Since that day, I've been unable to let go of my son's reaching hand. Thinking about him leaving for a foreign country next month brings tears to my eyes unreasonably. He might study there and even meet a woman to marry. Lately, I've been speaking to him in formal language. At first, he was surprised, but soon he listened attentively with a proud face. To be parting ways with such a thoughtful and deep son. I have no words if you find it suffocating, because he was the first man who truly reached out to me. Saying goodbye seems incredibly hard. My son, who filled my life of betrayal with smiles, is indeed my true husband.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Now, before we start today's story, I would like to inform all our listeners that Ben caught Kathy with Roger, once again doing what the Thai people call doing the boom boom. Like every husband who catches his wife cheating, Ben vomited at the bedroom door and left home in his Ford Mustang for parts unknown. Last we heard, he has adopted a female German Shepherd and named her Kathy. He now drives a Camaro and wears a t-shirt that says "Kathy is my bitch" and has a horse. Kathy never cleaned the mess at the bedroom door and looks at it every day and cries. Goddamn, that woman is miserable. Roger was assaulted by 70 bikers while he was having his ice cream. Having the ice cream cone stuffed up the wrong end of your anatomy, with the ice cream still in it, was not a pleasant experience. He will take some time to recover from the beating. We will keep you posted as to when our main characters can return. I will miss them. Now let's start with today's story. I've always believed that life needs a bit of humor. You know, the world's serious enough with bills, deadlines, and trying not to step in something while you're distracted on your phone. That's probably why I ended up in zoology, cracking jokes with the students, keeping things light. Because, honestly, who doesn't need a little bit of Ace Ventura energy in their life? Animals, gym, and the occasional dive bar. My holy trinity. But sometimes, when I'm quiet and alone, those old lessons from my father sneak back in. Dad wasn't one for lengthy lectures, but the few times he decided to get serious, you listened. The man had a way of cutting through the bullshit. On his deathbed, of all places, he gave me a piece of wisdom I'll never forget. He looked at me with those tired, knowing eyes and said, "Jake, if a woman tells you she doesn't need a man, agree with her and walk away. Life's too short to convince someone who's already decided she doesn't want you. And if she's controlling your life, son, you're already living in hell. If you let her control you, well, then you deserve hell. If she rejects logic just to satisfy her ego, smile, open the door like a gentleman, and once she's out, slam it shut like a caveman. At the end of the day, Dad wasn't just telling me how to deal with women. He was telling me how to deal with life. At the time, I just nodded along. I was young, dumb, and thought I had it all figured out. All right, let me set the scene for you. Picture your typical Tuesday afternoon on campus. I'm giving a lecture on animal mating rituals, always a student favorite, cracking jokes, keeping things lively. Class wraps up, and I'm heading out, mentally planning my next gym session, when I bump into Brenda. Now, Brenda, she's something else. Tall, with this kind of fierce, almost intimidating confidence. She's one of those people who walks like they own the place, and frankly, with looks like hers, she just might. She's a professor too, gender studies and political science. Now, normally, that's the kind of thing that would send me running in the opposite direction. I've always been more comfortable around, well, actual animals than people who argue about how humans should behave. But there was something about her that just grabbed me by the gut and didn't let go. Yeah, I'll admit it. She was hot. Smoking hot. The kind of hot that makes you overlook things. Like the fact that she was constantly talking about the patriarchy, or how she'd lecture me on the systemic oppression of women every time I tried to joke about something. But hey, we've all got our quirks, right? Besides, it's not like I was looking for my soulmate. So, naturally, I asked her out. To my surprise, she said yes. First date was dinner at some vegan place she picked out. Trust me, you haven't truly suffered until you've pretended to enjoy a plate of kale with a smile. But that smile of hers? Yeah, it made it worth it. The thing is, Brenda had this way of talking that was, well, kind of mesmerizing. She was so passionate, so convinced of every word that came out of her mouth. And okay, maybe half the time I didn't really get what she was saying about dismantling gender norms or decolonizing thought or whatever, but she was saying it with those intense eyes of hers, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to kiss her. So, I did. And for the next 2 months, I found myself tangled up in Brenda's world. We'd have these debates over dinner, her spouting off theories, me trying to keep up, both of us laughing when we hit a wall. It was surprisingly fun. And the nights? Man, those were the kind of passionate, can't keep your hands, other kind of nights that leave you breathless. Eventually, it just kind of made sense to move in together. I mean, why not? I was spending more nights at her place than my own anyway, and things felt good. Easy. Well, easy in the way that jumping into the deep end is easy. You either swim or you drown. But Brenda? She made me want to swim. Sure, there were a few moments where I wondered if I was getting in too deep. Like when she would critique something as basic as the way I joked with my buddies, saying it was problematic or whatever. But I'd just smile, give her that charming grin of mine, and pull her in for a kiss to change the subject. Worked every time. Besides, a wise man once told me, if a woman's telling you how to think, you're already in trouble. But, damn, trouble never looked so hot. So here I am, living with Brenda, enjoying the amazing sex and thinking with the only organ that my heart could pump blood to. Alright, so let me tell you about Brenda's friends. If you ever want to see how deep the rabbit hole of self-righteousness goes, just spend an evening with those people. The type that can take the most innocent comment and turn it into an example of internalized misogyny, or whatever the latest buzzword of the week is. They were always trying to catch me slipping, trying to humiliate me with these snide, passive-aggressive remarks, usually wrapped in that faux intellectual tone that's supposed to make them sound clever. But here's the thing. I'm not some dumb gym rat who just lifts heavy things and stares blankly when people start using big words. I can go toe-to-toe with the best of them, especially when it comes to logic. So every time they tried to trip me up, I'd turn it around on them. They'd throw shade. I'd shine it right back in their faces, always with a smile that said, I'm not just keeping up, I'm winning. Brenda would laugh it off, pretend to be amused by the banter, but I could tell there was something about it that bugged her. Maybe she didn't like that her unenlightened boyfriend could outsmart her enlightened friends. Or maybe it was just that I never played the part she had mentally cast me in. But the real kicker came with the whole spiritual trip thing. So, one night, she bursts into the apartment, all excited, talking about how she's planning this amazing trip to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, to be exact. She starts going on about how it's going to be this transformative, soul-awakening journey. Something about reconnecting with the earth, purging bad energies, blah blah blah. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for travel. Hell, I've been wanting to see Komodo dragons in their natural habitat since I was a kid. But when I hear spiritual journey, my bullshit meter goes into overdrive. I did what any rational person would do. I pointed out the obvious. Bryn, it's monsoon season there. We're talking floods, landslides, washed out roads. We'd be stuck inside, watching the rain pour down for days. I figured I was doing us both a favor by trying to be practical. But then she hits me with it. The attitude, the eye roll, the full-on lecture. Jake, I know what I'm doing. You think I haven't researched this? This isn't some silly vacation. It's a spiritual journey. And by the way, I'm sponsoring the whole thing. So maybe you just need to shut up and be grateful. That's when I felt the familiar knot tighten in my gut. The one that says, all right, buddy, here we go again. She's pulling the classic Brenda move. When logic doesn't fit into her grand plans, she shuts it down with attitude. And yeah, she's throwing money into the mix now, like I'm some charity case she's dragging along on her dime. The old me, the guy before Dad's deathbed advice, would have swallowed it down, tried to keep the peace. But these days, I'm not about to let anyone, no matter how hot they are, turn me into a yes man. So, I just looked at her, shrugged, and said, sure, Brenda, whatever you say. But I wasn't about to just roll over. Here's the thing. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve too. I'll let her think she's won this round. I'll play the obedient boyfriend. But if she thinks I'm going to be her little spiritual lapdog on this trip, she's got another thing coming. Besides, I am the a-hole who got a free trip to Indonesia. So, before you guys go down in that comment section and call me a simp, remember, I am getting a free trip to Indonesia. So here I am, in Indonesia, right in the thick of it. I thought maybe, just maybe, Brenda's spiritual trip would be a chance for us to connect, maybe relax a bit. But nope. The moment we landed, we were joined by Brenda's two flying monkeys, blue-haired, liberal feminist, left-leaning, man-hating champions of everything that hates guys like me. Let's just say the testosterone levels in this group were hitting record lows. They were thrilled to be here, of course. Our first stop? A meditation resort. While they were out there chanting, realigning their chakras, or whatever they do to commune with their inner goddess or Mother Earth or something, I was taking advantage of the daily full-body massages. And hey, if Brenda's footing the bill, I'm not going to say no to an hour of getting my knots worked out. Call it my personal spiritual journey, if you will. It was all fine, relatively peaceful, until one of Brenda's friends, the one with the septum piercing and the I hate patriarchy tank top, decided to make conversation. She asked me about my work, and I figured, fine, let's play nice. I told her about my research on Komodo dragons, specifically their venom and how we're studying its potential medical uses. To my surprise, all three of them were suddenly interested. Oh my God, Jake, can we go see the Komodo dragons in person? One of them squealed, eyes wide with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen since I was 10 years old watching Jurassic Park for the first time. I tried to be the voice of reason. Look, it's monsoon season right now, I said. The waters are rough. The boats to Komodo Island are not exactly luxury yachts, and the last thing we want is to be caught in a storm in the middle of the ocean. But of course, logic doesn't mean much when you're dealing with people who think facts are just tools of oppression. They dismissed me outright, saying I was just trying to ruin their adventure because I was a killjoy and afraid to take risks. For the next 2 days, I endured their collective wrath. Every meal, every stroll, it was the same. Snide comments about how I was just another toxic male trying to control their freedom, how I was too scared to embrace the unknown. It was like being pecked to death by 3 self-righteous parrots who'd memorized every TED Talk on the evils of masculinity. By the time dinner rolled around on the second day, I was at my breaking point. I can handle a lot. Hell, I've worked with unpredictable animals my entire life. But this was a different kind of endurance test. Every joke, every attempt to lighten the mood was shot down, twisted into something sinister. But here's the thing. I'm not the kind of guy to blow up. Dad always said, if they want to see you crack, that's when you smile wider. So, I plastered on that grin, laughed along with their digs, even raised a glass to their bravery for wanting to go to Komodo Island despite my irrational fears. You know that feeling when you're staring down at something you know is going to go sideways, but you just have to watch it unfold because you're powerless to stop it? Yeah, that was me when Brenda and her 2 pet feminists announced they'd already booked a boat to Komodo Island. They went behind my back after I told them it wasn't safe. One of them, let's call her septum piercing, looked me dead in the eye, practically daring me to object. We don't need you, Jake, she said, her voice dripping with defiance. We've already got it handled. Great. Just fantastic. But then Brenda turned to me with that look, the one she gets when she's about to launch into one of her lectures on gender equality. Jake, she said, her voice all sweet and condescending, I want you to come with us. I need to show you how a real woman deals with her life. You and I are equals, you know? Anything you can do, I can do just as well. Oh, the irony. I've seen Komodo dragons take down a full-grown water buffalo with a single bite, patiently waiting for the venom to do its work. But here I was, dealing with a different kind of venom, the human variety, and it was slowly draining my patience. Still, I couldn't just let them walk into danger. They might think they're invincible, but those dragons? They don't care how empowered you are. So, despite every instinct telling me to let them go and learn a harsh lesson, I agreed to tag along. The whole boat ride there was just more of the same. 3 hours of being berated, mocked, and lectured. You're just scared, Jake. One of them said, a smirk plastered on her face. You're so used to controlling everything around you. You can't handle a woman making her own decisions. I smiled, clenched my jaw, and let them talk. My dad's voice echoed in my head. Let them talk, son. The louder they get, the more they expose themselves. But I kept a close eye on the storm clouds gathering in the distance, the waves getting choppier by the minute. I didn't say a word, knowing full well that any attempt to point out the obvious would just feed into their narrative that I was trying to control them. Brenda, of course, was soaking it all in, loving how her friends were, putting me in my place. When we finally got off the boat on Komodo Island, the sky was a brooding gray, heavy with rain waiting to fall. The air smelled of salt and rot, the jungle dense and dark just beyond the shoreline. The three of them stepped onto the island like they were conquering heroes, completely oblivious to the very real danger lurking in the shadows. As we were unloading, one of the local boatmen, a grizzled old guy with leathery skin and a permanent squint, leaned in close to me. His voice was low, barely a whisper, as he muttered in broken English, "You run." Before too late, I looked into his eyes and saw something there. Fear, or maybe pity. Either way, it sent a chill down my spine. Because this wasn't just some friendly advice. This was the warning of a man who knew exactly what was out there waiting for us. But turning back wasn't an option now. Not when Brenda was so determined to prove her point. Not when I knew that if I bailed, they'd just keep pushing deeper into the jungle, completely unaware of what they were walking into. So, I squared my shoulders, nodded to the old boatman, and followed them onto the island, all while wondering how the hell I got myself into this mess. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find out exactly what he meant. The moment we set foot on Komodo Island, I had that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. You know, the one that tells you you're about to walk headfirst into a mess. As we hit the shore, I turned to Brenda and her two sidekicks and asked the most basic question. Where's the guide? Septum-piercing laugh like I had just told the world's funniest joke. A guide? Oh, Jake, you're so precious. We don't need a guide. Brenda backed her up, flashing me that infuriating, patronizing smile she reserved for moments like these. Relax, Jake. It's not like we're helpless. We've read about the island. We know what we're doing. They casually started walking toward the jungle like it was Central Park on a sunny afternoon. I shook my head, trying to suppress the urge to tell them off. But I couldn't help myself. This isn't a park. It's a goddamn jungle, I called out, my voice getting drowned out by the sudden clap of thunder overhead. People get killed here. And then, as if nature was throwing its weight behind my argument, the sky opened up, drenching us in a torrential downpour. It was like someone had just flipped a switch. The women shrieked, more annoyed than concerned, and darted toward the trees for cover. Meanwhile, I did what I always do. I looked around for someone who actually knew what they were doing. I spotted a guy in a weather-beaten uniform, looking more like he belonged in a war zone than a tourist destination. I jogged over to him, hoping he might have some good news. The park's closed, he said in broken English, shouting over the rain. Too dangerous now. Only a few of us here to keep watch. His eyes flicked to the women, who were laughing and splashing around like this was some spontaneous adventure. I could see it on his face. He knew the type. He gave me a look that said, "Good luck, brother. You're going to need it." I hustled back to Brenda and her entourage, already soaked to the bone. "We need to get back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There are barely any staff here, and they've shut the park down. We have to call for the boat and get off this island." Brenda looked at me like I was the village idiot. "Oh, Jake, stop being such a drama queen," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "We came here to explore, not to be told what to do." The other two chimed in with their usual chorus. "We don't need a man to tell us how to handle ourselves." And just like that, they turned their backs on me and marched deeper into the jungle. I stood there for a second, letting the rain hammer down on my face, wondering how the hell I ended up here. trying to keep alive 3 women who were hellbent on proving they didn't need me or anyone else. As they disappeared into the dense foliage, I had no choice but to follow. Because, despite everything, I couldn't just walk away. Not when I knew the kind of predators lurking in these shadows, the ones with scales, claws, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. And I had a sinking feeling that the island wasn't going to be as forgiving as I was. There's a certain kind of darkness in the jungle that plays tricks on your mind. It's not just the absence of light. It's the way every rustle, every distant cry feels like something watching, waiting. As night fell, the reality that we were truly lost started to sink in. The rain had tapered off, leaving the air thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. My instincts were screaming that we needed to stop, regroup, and figure this out. "Hold up," I said, trying to get their attention. "We're going to get even more lost if we keep going like this." But my words were like smoke in the wind. Brenda, septum piercing, and blue hair were too busy stomping through the underbrush, arguing about the best way to find the beach. They were convinced they'd just follow the sound of the waves, like some bad survival show. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We need to stay away from the beaches," I told them, keeping my voice steady. "Komodo dragons patrol the shoreline at night looking for dead fish. They're not the cute little lizards you see at the pet store. They'll rip you apart." But, of course, they didn't want to hear it. "You know nothing, Jon Snow," Blue Hair sneered, quoting Game of Thrones like this was some kind of joke. The other 2 erupted in laughter, their voices loud enough to carry through the jungle. "Perfect. Let's just announce our presence to every hungry predator within a mile." Brenda turned to me, her eyes narrowed, that familiar mix of arrogance and condescension plastered on her face. "We're going to the beach," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "If you're scared, then go find your own way. But don't blame us when we're sipping cocktails back at the resort." That's when I realized I'd hit my limit. I was done trying to save people who didn't want saving. I was done with the constant belittling, the snide comments, the condescending laughter. I'd put up with it this whole trip, swallowing my pride for the sake of peace. But there's only so much a man can take, especially when the stakes are this high. I looked Brenda dead in the eyes, feeling something cold settle in my gut. I'm not risking a bite from a Komodo dragon just to prove a point. "The massages were nice, Brenda, but they're not worth getting torn apart for." I shook my head and took a step back. "You want to walk into the lion's den? Be my guest." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving them to their arrogant bravado. I could hear them calling after me, mocking me, telling me I was weak, a coward. But for the first time since we set foot on this godforsaken island, I felt a strange sense of peace. I'd done my part. I'd warned them, tried to keep them safe. But I wasn't going to be dragged into their ego-fueled death wish. As I headed toward the stream, using the moonlight filtering through the trees to guide me, I couldn't help but wonder if this was what Dad meant. Sometimes, you just have to let people face the consequences of their own decisions. Maybe they'd be fine. Maybe they'd find their way back to the boat without incident. But deep down, I knew the island had its own plans, and it wasn't as forgiving as I was. I'll never forget that moment when I stumbled upon the wooden post, barely visible in the darkness. Relief hit me like a wave. Finally, a sliver of hope in this cursed place. The guard, a wiry guy who looked like he'd seen more than his share of danger, was sitting there with a walkie-talkie in his hand, the static hissing like a bad omen. I was out of breath and soaked to the bone, but I managed to get the words out. "There are 3 women. They went into the jungle. They're lost." He looked at me with eyes that were far too calm for the situation. Shaking his head slowly, he said, "We can't go in there. Not now. Too dangerous at night, especially after the rain." I could feel my stomach drop. "But they don't know what they're doing. They're not equipped for this." My voice was rising, but he just held up a hand. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and steady. "The island is closed. Most of the guards left. It's just me and a few others. The jungle is too dangerous after dark, especially with the rain. We go in now, we don't come back." I wanted to argue, to scream, to demand that he do something. But the truth is, I knew he was right. I'd seen enough in my line of work to understand that nature doesn't care about your pride or your politics. It's indifferent to whether you think you're strong, independent, or invincible. Out here, all that matters is survival. So, I did the only thing I could do. I waited. I paced that tiny post like a caged animal, listening to the rain pounding on the roof, my mind running in circles. I replayed everything over and over. The warnings I'd given, the arrogance in their voices, the moment I turned my back. Maybe I should have forced them to listen, dragged them away if I had to. But I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't have made a difference. They were determined to prove they didn't need me, or any man, for that matter. The night stretched on forever. The rain didn't let up, turning the jungle into a muddy, slippery death trap. The guard tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't even sit down. Every rustle outside, every distant call of some unknown animal, sent my nerves into overdrive. I kept imagining them out there, huddled together, scared out of their minds. Or worse, coming face to face with something that wouldn't hesitate to turn them into dinner. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the trees, I was already out the door. The guard reluctantly agreed to come with me, but he made it clear we weren't going far. If we don't find them soon, we turn back, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. We combed through the jungle, shouting their names, hoping for some sign of life. But all we found was silence. The rain had washed away any tracks, and the jungle was eerily still, as if it had swallowed them whole. After hours of searching, we came up empty. No sign of Brenda, no sign of her friends. Just endless trees, thick mud, and that suffocating feeling of dread pressing down on me. I stood there, drenched and exhausted, staring into the dense foliage as if somehow I could will them to appear. But they didn't. They were gone, just like the guard had warned, swallowed by the very jungle they thought they could conquer. And all I could think was, I tried to tell them. I tried. But in the end, it didn't matter. Nature doesn't care about debates or ideologies. Out here, all that matters is who survives. And sometimes, you have to let people make their own mistakes, even if it means they don't come back from them. The moment the police walked into that wooden outpost, I knew my nightmare was just beginning. I had barely slept in days, my mind replaying every second of that godforsaken jungle trek. As soon as I was back in the city, they put me through the ringer with questions. And who could blame them? 3 women had vanished, and I was the last one to see them alive. I told them everything I could remember. How I warned them, how they refused to listen, how they walked straight into danger, blind with arrogance. For hours, it felt like I was being treated like a criminal. Every detail I gave, every statement I made, they scrutinized as if searching for cracks. But thankfully, the boatmen and the guards backed up my story. They saw how I tried to convince Brenda and her friends to turn back, how they dismissed me like I was just some annoying fly buzzing around their heads. It wasn't enough to save their lives, but at least it was enough to clear my name. They kept me in Indonesia for 3 days while they conducted their search. 3 days of hell, waiting in that hotel room. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of what had happened. I'd stare out of the window, hoping, no, praying, they'd find them alive. Maybe they'd been holed up somewhere, hiding from the rain, waiting for rescue. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd been around wild animals long enough to recognize the scent of death. Eventually, they let me go. There was nothing more I could do, nothing left to say. I flew home, trying to leave that place behind me, but it haunted me like a shadow. Then, a week later, the call came. 3 bodies found in the jungle. The police officer's voice was cold, detached, as he described their condition. Poisoning from Komodo dragon bites. The beasts had done what they do best, scavenged what was left. I should have felt some relief when he told me that the boatmen and guards had corroborated my story, that the families had finally accepted it wasn't my fault. But it didn't bring me any comfort. They were still dead. Brenda, with all her fire and passion, was gone. And so were her friends. Their arrogance, their refusal to listen. It had cost them their lives. Every time I close my eyes, I still see them laughing at me, mocking me, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. And then I see them again, in the jungle, helpless against creatures that couldn't care less about ideologies or equality. Out there, it's kill or be killed. Nature has no mercy, no patience for hubris. I tried to warn them. I really did. But in the end, I did what my dad told me. If she rejects logic just to satisfy her ego, smile, open the door like a gentleman, and once she's out, slam it shut like a caveman. Walking into Septum Piercing's funeral, I had to brace myself. It wasn't just the heavy air of grief. It was the cold stares from everyone in the room. I could feel their eyes boring into me, silent accusations hanging in the air like a noose. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that. But a part of me wanted to pay my respects, to close the chapter, even if it meant stepping right into the lion's den of judgment. I didn't go alone. 2 of my gym buddies, Mike and Dan, tagged along. They weren't close to Brenda or her friends, but they knew the story. Hell, they'd heard me rant about it for months. The insults, the stubbornness, The way those women treated me like I was a caveman just for using common sense. Mike and Dan had my back, and for that, I was grateful. We all knew it would be an uncomfortable scene, but none of us expected the tension to be this thick. Who am I kidding with these heavy words? They just wanted to see a half-eaten Komodo dragon victim. When the time came to carry the casket of the one who'd given me the most hell, the loudest, the most aggressive of Brenda's crew, I didn't flinch. As much as she and I had butted heads, there was still something profoundly sobering about carrying her lifeless body or what was left of it. The finality of it all hit me, but only for a second, then it went away. Because just as we lifted the casket, I heard it. Mike's voice, a whisper just for our group. That's a light deadlift. I almost lost it right there. It was so inappropriate, so darkly timed, but also exactly the kind of grim humor that had gotten me through these past weeks. I bit my cheek to keep from laughing, my eyes watering. Not from grief, but from holding back the absurdity of the situation. This woman, who had spent so much time tearing me down, was now reduced to this. A weight I could lift with one hand if I wanted. And maybe that's what made it so painfully ironic. All that bravado, all that self-righteous fury, and now it came down to this. Being carried out of this world by the very man she loved to belittle. I don't know if it made me a bad person, but as we set her down, I couldn't help but think. She finally found out the hard way that life isn't a debate you can win with words. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Anniversary bombshell, discovering my wife's cheating and friend's betrayal at a family gathering. I woke up one Sunday morning, rolling over to gaze at my wife of 5 years, Rose. She woke up too, pulling my head toward hers and gently kissing me. Acknowledging Rose's fatigue, she mentioned that I had worn her out the previous night. I explained that my intention was to get her pregnant. Reassuringly, she wrapped her arms around me and conveyed that I would get her pregnant, asking me to be patient. We lay in bed, chatting as usual. Our conversation revolved around her work, with Rose determined to secure a promotion to the regional sales management position. After a few minutes of the familiar work-related discussion, I suggested she take a shower, while Rose suggested that I shower. She agreed with the plan for me to run out and grab one of my specialty coffees. As I headed toward the door, I realized I had forgotten my car keys and turned back. Knowing Rose kept a key to my car in her purse for emergencies, I spotted her purse on the kitchen counter. Instead of going back upstairs, I decided to retrieve the key from her purse. Digging through the clutter, I discovered a zipper on the inside. Unzipping the compartment, I found the birth control pills Rose had promised to stop taking. She had gone off birth control a couple of months ago as we were trying to start a family. Examining the package, I noticed a third of the pills were missing. Turning it over, I saw the prescription label with a date only a few weeks ago, indicating she was still on birth control. I put everything back as I found it, and quietly went upstairs to get my keys without Rose hearing me. On my way to get her coffee, my mind was buzzing with thoughts. I couldn't fathom why she would lie to me about being off birth control. I was confident she wasn't having an affair, as when she wasn't at work, she was with me. Her close girlfriend was the only variable, but her husband was also my best friend. I felt I knew where she was almost all the time, except during work hours. Feeling truly disappointed and under the impression that she didn't want to have kids despite seeming to be trying, I was lost in my thoughts. Around 4 p.m., Rose shook me out of my reverie. Observing my distant demeanor, she encouraged me to prepare, emphasizing that we were running late for dinner at Bill and Sherry's. Additionally, Bill had requested her assistance in his shop afterward. Upon arriving at their place, Bill sensed that something was amiss and asked about it. Initially, I insisted that nothing was wrong, but he persisted, claiming to know me better than I knew myself. He urged me to share my concerns. Reluctantly, I disclosed what I had discovered, that Rose had stopped taking the pill a couple of months ago. We explored potential reasons for her actions when Bill suggested the idea of hiring a private investigator. He emphasized my emotional state and noted that only a few hours had passed, assuring me that Rose wasn't having an affair. When I questioned him to provide evidence, he suggested, "If you're so sure she isn't, what are you afraid of? Hire a PI. Once he confirms she's not involved with someone else, you can talk to her about kids and maybe better understand why she lied about taking the pill." On Monday morning, I enlisted the services of a private investigator professional our company utilized for security matters and other concerns. After a conversation, the PI reassured me that it didn't seem like Rose was having an affair based on the information I provided. He informed me that he would conduct some checks both during her work hours and off-duty. I also expressed the need to look into her medical records, as women can have unexpected issues. Despite periodic check-ins from the PI, I received no significant updates. Despite my attempts to conceal my emotions, I found myself unable to engage in closeness with Rose. Finally, on Saturday, Rose confronted me, demanding an explanation for my avoidance. Attempting to shift the blame, I accused her of lacking interest in closeness, triggering a major argument or first significant fight. When I confided in Bill about it, he warned me that unless I changed my behavior quickly, Rose would suspect something was amiss. Taking Bill's advice to heart, I humbly sought forgiveness, attributing my actions to fear. Rose appeared puzzled but now also concerned, making me wonder if she might be having an affair for the first time. As the days passed, I struggled to maintain my sanity. Bill played a crucial role in helping me stay focused and optimistic. In the middle of the third week, I began thinking about Rose's upcoming 25th birthday and wanted to plan something special. Taking inspiration from Bill's wife, Sherry, I decided on a half-50 theme birthday party, including a walking cane cut in half and other creative elements. During a Thursday morning meeting with the PI, which I expected to last no more than 30 minutes, we ended up talking for over 2 hours. After the PI departed, I sat in a daze until the phone rang. Knowing I had met with the PI, Bill called me, and we arranged to meet. I needed a drink, a strong one, and by the time Bill joined me at the bar, I was on my third. Seeing my condition, Bill remarked, "This isn't good, is it?" The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by intense anger. As I slid the folder over for Bill to peruse, I briefed him on the condensed version of the PI's findings. Bill examined the pictures with times and dates, inquiring about the CD in the folder. I explained it was a video of Rose and her boss in an intimate situation. The PI had advised me to watch the video and, more importantly, listen to the dialogue. Bill called his wife and instructed her to take Rose to the movies or the mall under the guise of planning her birthday party. Sherry, enthusiastic about helping with a positive surprise for Rose, complied. Bill and I watched the CD, and it brought tears to my eyes. The PI was correct. He was genuinely surprised by Rose's motive for being with her boss. She was pursuing the promotion she had discussed for months. We sat in silence, simply asking if we wanted another drink. After a while, I confided in Bill, expressing that if Rose had come to me and confessed to falling in love with her boss or needing more satisfaction than she was getting from me, I felt I could handle it. While I acknowledged I would be hurt and disappointed, the idea of witnessing my wife with her boss just to secure a promotion went beyond mere hurt. I conveyed that I was not only hurt, but also furious, and I made it clear that Rose would feel the full extent of my anger. Bill then remarked that observing Rose and her boss was like seeing her physically there but emotionally absent. He noted that regardless, she had prioritized her job over our marriage, and now she would have to live with that choice. Handing me my drink, Bill added that the girls would be home soon, and asked if I knew what I was going to do. I responded, stating that I believed I knew what to do. Looking up at Bill, I continued by sharing that next Monday was Rose's birthday, and I was determined to give her a surprise birthday party she would never forget. Acknowledging the need to act fast, I mentioned that I would require Bill's help and proposed involving Sherry if that was acceptable to him. Bill agreed, stating that Sherry and Rose were close, assuring me that Sherry wouldn't do anything to hurt Rose. He clarified that Sherry wouldn't be involved for that purpose, however. He noted that Sherry knew all the people to invite and emphasized the importance of my presence at the party to help execute his plan. Feigning more intoxication than I was, I successfully avoided Rose when the girls returned home. The next workday, I consulted with a computer-savvy colleague in the shipping department, detailing my requirements for pictures and a video which he assured me he could easily create. I called Sherry and shared with her that I planned to use her idea but wanted the party to be a surprise. I suggested having it on Sunday afternoon around 3 p.m. and asked for her assistance. Sherry enthusiastically agreed. I instructed her to contact all the people for the party and mentioned that she would need to get Rose out of the house on Sunday for a few hours. Just before we hung up, I told her I would inform Rose's parents. Next, I went over to Rose's work, asking her to lunch, which she told me she couldn't do as she was to be in a meeting. That was fine because the reason I went there was to invite her boss to her birthday party. I informed him about a surprise birthday party I was planning for her and expressed that it would be great if he could attend. I suggested bringing his wife, adding that it would be a fun gathering. I expressed my hope that he could come and requested that, if possible, he should park at the grade school. This way, when Rose's friend brought her home, she wouldn't see all the cars. I mentioned that a friend of mine would be escorting the guests from the school to my house and emphasized that it would be a fun event. I concluded by expressing my hope that he could make it. Next, after work, I went to Rose's parents' house, telling them my idea for the birthday party. Rose's mom gathered some pictures of Rose from childbirth up to our wedding. Later that night, I went to the computer guy's house. I showed him everything I had and gave him my idea of how I wanted the evening to go. He didn't say much, but after listening to me, he suggested a different way, which would have a more significant impact on everyone. I liked what he suggested, and after agreeing to his idea, he told me he would have it done and ready for me by Saturday. Wednesday, I went to a lawyer's office and initiated divorce proceedings, with the reason being infidelity. Additionally, the attorney suggested pursuing legal action against her boss and the company they work for, expressing confidence in obtaining compensation from Rose's company. On Friday evening, I had Bill sitting across the table from me. I commented that when you think things can't get worse, they seem to find a way. Bill asked me in response what I meant. Well, Wednesday, when I went to see the attorney, I spent more time there than I thought I would. When I left the attorney's office, my mind was filled with my marriage problems, causing me to forget to go back to work and send off the bid for a job. The company lost out on the job, so today they suspended me for 30 days without pay. If it weren't for my boss, who knows that my marriage is going down the tubes, I would have been fired. My boss, though, wants me far away from Rose in this mess so I can get my head screwed back on. He gave me his timeshare that he has in Mexico to use, telling me that if I want to keep my job, I'll be in Mexico no later than Wednesday. Bill inquired if I was going. I replied affirmatively, expressing that I couldn't afford to lose this job. I suggested we proceed with discussing the details and potential scenarios at Rose's surprise birthday party. I explained how the pictures were going to be displayed, and also how I hoped the evening would go once I started the picture event. Bill was to ensure that Rose's boss didn't get away, as I wanted him to see the entire show. I also told Bill that the person playing the bartender would also be serving the divorce papers to Rose and papers to her boss. Arriving home, Rose was upset and demanded to know my whereabouts. I explained that I was with Bill. She dismissed it, saying it was no big deal. However, she disagreed, arguing that it was a big deal because she had come home early with great news and I wasn't there. Rose accused me of excessive drinking and avoidance, stating that it seemed like I had a girlfriend. My face turned red, fueled by anger. Seeing my reaction, Rose appeared concerned. How could she accuse me of having a girlfriend while she pursued a job promotion by being involved with her boss? On the verge of losing my temper, Bill's voice echoed in my head, prompting me to apologize, deny having a girlfriend, and inquire about the good news. She shared with great excitement that she got the promotion, and starting next month, she would be the new regional sales manager. Rose expressed her joy by jumping up and down, then running into my arms and hugging me tightly, surprising me again when I didn't think she could. With her arms still around me, hugging me tight, Rose conveyed, "Now we'll get that baby we want." Pushing her back to arm's length, I inquired about the meaning behind her words. Rose promptly nestled herself back into my chest and conveyed that our luck was changing, expressing a sense that things were going our way. She shared the news of her promotion and professed her love, confidently anticipating that I would be the one to make her pregnant. Following that, she looked up at me and sought confirmation about my desire for a baby. Rose, seeing the tears in my eyes, thought they were because of the baby, when in fact, the tears were because I was soon going to lose the only woman I have ever been in love with. Grabbing me by the hand, Rose led me to her bedroom. We climaxed together. Rose expressed a desire for closeness again on Saturday morning, and I complied, although my involvement was perfunctory. While I was in the shower, Rose entered with a concerned expression and inquired about any concerns bothering me. She conveyed surprise at her recent inability to outlast me in lovemaking. In response, I encouraged her not to dismiss the possibility that something might be wrong. I pointed out my altered behavior over the past few weeks and the excessive consumption of drinks. Swiftly changing the subject, I admitted feeling responsible for our inability to conceive, suggesting a potential issue with my body. I proposed the idea of seeking medical advice, considering she had been off the pill for several months. Looking at her, I mentioned, "Maybe there is something wrong with my body and I should see a doctor. After all, you have been off the pill for several months now, right?" Rose took hold of me, and without directly addressing my question, proceeded to provide a significant pep talk, emphasizing that I was placing too much pressure on myself. She also said that now she has gotten her promotion at work, she too will be more relaxed, and even though she just can't explain it, she knows that I'll get her knocked up very soon. I thought to myself, I bet you could explain it if you wanted to. Saturday night, Rose wanted lovemaking again, but this time I did too. It would be the last time for us, so I gave her all I had. I think, though, she could tell that there was very little love in my lovemaking. It was just lovemaking. Sunday morning came, and I wasn't as nervous as I thought I would be. While Rose was taking a shower, I called Sher, asking if she had a plan to get Rose out of the house. Sherry assured me that she did, and told me she was proud of me for giving this party for Rose, as she knew Rose would always remember it. I nearly chuckled, thinking she'd remember this for quite some time. When she descended the stairs, I inquired about her plans for the day. "Why?" she asked. I explained Bill had called, needing my help with Cher's honey-do list. Rose responded, "Great," as Cher planned breakfast for the four of us, followed by helping her choose bedroom drapes. At 3:10, Sherry followed Rose into our house, everyone shouting, "Surprise!" Rose, greatly surprised, approached me with a big hug, thanking me as she had no clue about the birthday party. Scanning the guests, I heard Rose ask Sherry if she invited her boss. Sherry's negative response brought back that worried look on Rose's face. With my 2 key people in place, the party kicked off with people laughing and mingling. I waited for almost 2 hours to ensure everyone had food, mostly lots of booze. With Bill's help, we gathered everyone in the living room, preparing for the show of the year. Addressing everyone, I expressed gratitude for their presence and suggested taking a look at the first half of Rose's 50th birthday, before proceeding with the opening of cards and gifts. Smiling at Rose's parents, her cousin, and her boss with his wife, I gestured for everyone to be seated. Once everyone was settled, anticipation filled the room as they knew the theme of the party. Switching on the TV and my laptop, I announced, "Here we go." The first picture displayed Rose at 2 months old, unclothed, lying on the bed. Whistles and jeers followed my comment, noting the nice spot on her. Rose blushed deeply as subsequent pictures slowly appeared on the screen. I joked or explained each picture, occasionally seeking input from her mom, resulting in teasing moments. From grade school to high school, I highlighted Rose's unwavering motivation. College pictures showcased her determination, including snagging me. Laughter echoed, and Rose enjoyed the show. Our wedding picture followed, with comments about my long hair. A picture of Rose's workplace appeared, then her desk, earned through promotion as the top salesperson. The next picture showed Rose's boss with his wife at our table during the Moss party. Rose sat next to her boss, another employee beside her, with me absent. Rose's smile faded, replaced by a worried look, glancing at her boss, who also lost his smile. I suspected exchanged glances. I expressed hope that Rose's boss acknowledges her dedication, hard work, and aids her in securing the coveted regional sales manager position. As I finished, I looked directly at Rose, sensing fear as she had revealed her promotion to me. I started the video, emphasizing Rose's hard work for the new position. More pictures, everyone. The video displayed an empty bed with Rose, telling her boss it was the last time as per their agreement. The video transitioned to Rose on the bed, with her boss between her legs. Simultaneously, her boss urged her to take certain actions if she desired the promotion. This led to gasps and some people leaving as the video swiftly changed to depict Rose on her hands and knees with her boss behind her, holding on to her hip, engaging in a specific intimate position. During the transition, her boss expressed satisfaction, noting that with this performance, she would be promoted to the vice president status. The video had played for about seconds, with an additional seconds left, showcasing 2 more positions, but chaos erupted. Rose, in a frenzy, screamed for me to turn it off, tearfully apologizing. Her boss attempted a swift exit, but my friend Bill instructed him to stay put. A punch to the jaw from Bill left her boss seated when he tried to push past. My ally shouted the boss's name, and when the foolish person responded, he was served legal papers, tossed into his lap. Sherry, attempting to console Rose, missed the boss's wife approaching. Seizing Sherry by the hair, she shoved her, causing Sherry to fall onto the couch where they were seated. As Sherry fell, she pulled on Rose's arm, turning her to face the boss's wife. While insulting my wife, the boss's wife landed a right hook on Rose's cheekbone. Rose was propelled backward, landing on her side. Sherry leaped up, yelling as she grabbed the boss's wife. Bill swiftly approached the women, and when Sherry was shoved again, Bill caught her before she hit the floor. I hurried over to intervene, but with Rose on the ground and Bill holding Sherry, I thought the worst was over. The boss lady turned, looking at Rose and hurling insults. Rose, now on her hands and knees, reached over to place her hand on the ottoman, slowly lifting her knee and attempting to stand. Rose tried to stand, but her head was still spinning from the punch. This left her back toward the boss lady, with her legs about a foot apart. I reached Rose to help her up and ensure she didn't get hit again. Turning my head to check the boss lady's location, I saw her take a full step toward my wife. Then, like an NFL punter, she kicked Rose squarely between her legs. Just as I put my hand on Rose's arm, I felt the impact rock her entire body. If the boss lady were punting a football, it would have easily gone 40 yards. Rose's body went 2 feet up and 3 feet forward. Rose let out a scream louder than I had ever heard. Landing on top of the ottoman and bouncing off, she fell onto her side. Rose screamed from the moment she was kicked until she finally landed on the carpet. Once on the carpet, Rose's knees came up to her chest, hands between her legs, crying harder than I had ever heard anyone cry. Bill seized the boss lady by the back of the neck, pulling her out of the house and directing her and her husband to leave. As Bill forced her out, the boss lady shouted that a particular circumstance wouldn't lead to a promotion now. Sherry hurried over, kneeling down to assist Rose and shouting at me to step back. Disregarding Sherry, I approached Rose's side, reassuring her that I had not intended for anyone to damage her. Rose was in so much pain that I know she didn't hear me. Then, looking down, I saw blood seeping into her cotton pants. I grabbed Sherry to get her attention, pointing to the blood. Sherry quickly told me to call an ambulance. I didn't ride with Rose in the ambulance, but instead took my car. I hadn't planned on this physical assault, nor had I wanted Rose physically hurt. I wasn't sure what I was going to do at this time. Bill, Sherry, and I were in the waiting room when the emergency doctor came to talk to us. He informed me that Rose was going in for surgery as soon as the specialist got there. He asked me what happened, and I told him that she was kicked in the groin by another woman. After a few more questions, he asked me if I wanted to see her, which I said no. A few hours later, the operating doctor approached me to provide an update. They mentioned having never seen an injury like this, explaining that the impact had struck her at the base of her love button area, causing the tissue to explode in 3 directions due to the force. The doctor stated that they had repaired everything, but expressed concern about her love button. They conveyed that if it didn't repair itself, it could have an impact on her ability to enjoy intimacy. I inquired about the details. The doctor explained that the love button area plays a role in stimulating women during intimacy, contributing to enjoyment and aiding in achieving pleasure. They expressed concern that if the area didn't heal properly, it could make it challenging, if not impossible, for her to experience pleasure. The doctor mentioned she would be in recovery for a couple of hours, and then I could visit her. Leaving the hospital a few minutes later, Bill stayed with Sherry. There, we stopped for a meal, conversed for a while, and then I went home. On Monday morning around a.m., Sherry called me, asking when I would be visiting Rose. I wasn't sure, possibly tomorrow. Sherry pressed me, and I decided to hang up and turn off my phone. On Tuesday, I entered Rose's room just after lunch. Sherry gave me a disapproving look as I approached the side of Rose's bed. Without giving Rose a chance to speak, I began explaining. I admitted that I aimed to humiliate and embarrass her, wanting everyone to know that Shinat Mehad caused the end of our marriage. I accused her of lying about being off birth control and being unfaithful. Despite my anger, I emphasized that I never intended or desired any physical damage to befall her. I clarified that despite being extremely upset, the thought of physically hurting her never crossed my mind. I expressed the hope that she would believe me. Tears streamed down Rose's face, prompting me to turn to leave. However, Rose reached out and grabbed my hand, pleading with me not to go. Rose assured me that she trusted I wouldn't damage her physically. She implored me to stay and talk with her, but I declined, stating that I couldn't. I explained that due to the emotional turmoil caused by her infidelity, my mind and heart were in disarray, leading to a significant mistake at work. While the corporate higher-ups contemplated firing me, my boss, who knew about our marital problems, intervened and prevented them from terminating my employment. As a result, I informed Rose that I would be leaving town for a month. However, I'm facing disciplinary action again. With my boss's assistance, I've been suspended for 30 days without pay. I have a month to address our problems and straighten out my thoughts. My boss has offered me his timeshare in Mexico and allowed me to cash out the 3 weeks of unused vacation. Sherry exclaimed that I couldn't leave Rose because she needed me. I looked at Sherry and explained that I could leave, emphasizing that I couldn't risk losing my job. I mentioned having a great teacher, pointing to Rousseau had taught me to prioritize my job over my marriage. Rose quickly interjected, expressing her apologies. Addressing Rose, I said, "There's one more thing. I'm far from finished with your boss. I will make him pay for this, assuring you that a storm is coming for that idiot. My intention is not to bring any repercussions your way. I'm telling you this because I believe he'll throw you under the bus to save himself. The house has been cleaned, all remnants of the party disposed of. On the kitchen table, you'll find materials from the PI and divorce papers for you to sign." Speaking of divorce papers made Rose squeeze my hand hard, hoping I wouldn't be able to pull away as tears flowed again. "Rose, I left that material not to cause you more pain, but just in case you can use any of it to protect yourself from your boss. I think, and I hope, you get yourself a good lawyer, Rose." "Well, I have to get going, as I have a plane to catch." Rose insisted that she wouldn't sign the divorce papers until we had a lengthy conversation. I shook my head and conveyed to her that she still didn't understand. I asserted that she was no longer in control, emphasizing that I didn't have to do anything for her. Pulling my hand away, I added that she had messed that up. As I started to walk out, Rose shouted, pleading for me to wait. I stopped and turned toward her. With tears streaming down her face, Rose expressed her profound love for me. She asked if, upon my return, I would please meet with her. At that moment, I said, "Rose, I'll have to say no. It hurts too much just to be here with you. Maybe after I get back, I'll think differently." Bill awaited me outside the hospital to provide transportation to the airport. The ride was quiet, given that Bill was already informed about most of the details surrounding the events and my strategy concerning Rose's boss. I directed him to keep me informed of any developments related to Rose's boss, and he agreed to do so. Additionally, Bill offered to provide updates on Rose's situation. Curious, I inquired about the reason I would want him to keep me updated. Bill chuckled and replied, conveying that I still loved her, which I acknowledged with laughter. I admitted to loving her but emphasized that I couldn't allow anyone to walk over me. Second story, at 32 years old, I am currently in the process of divorcing my 33-year-old wife after discovering that my 5-year-old son is not biologically mine. A couple of weeks ago, I uncovered my wife's infidelity from 6 years ago. Her sister disclosed this information during a visit to discuss the delivery of her first child. According to her sister, my wife admitted to sleeping with her best friend while intoxicated 6 years ago, expressing remorse at that time. Upon learning this, I promptly took a paternity test with my son, fearing the worst. The results, a week later, confirmed that my son is not my biological child. Strangely, I began to perceive the boy differently, more like an acquaintance than a son. Armed with evidence, I confronted my wife at night when the child was sleeping. Despite her inquiries about who told me, I maintained that it was none of her business, even though she would likely connect the dots to her sister. Initiating divorce proceedings left her devastated, despite her multiple assurances that nothing had happened with anyone else since then, and claims of faithfulness in body and soul. I refrained from insulting her to avoid complications during the divorce, despite my disbelief and her blaming of alcohol instead of taking responsibility. In our conversation, she threatened to demand full custody of the child. Annoyed, I expressed disinterest in anything not biologically mine, allowing her to keep the child while I would keep our 2 dogs. She attempted to convince me to co-parent, asserting that I am the child's father. In anger, I exploded, yelling at her to go and take her child with her, referring to him as a fool. A week has passed since the incident. I am at home, which is in my name as a gift from my parents. She went to her parents' house with the child and has not contacted me since. My parents support my decision, and my dad believes I did the right thing by not raising someone not of my blood. I'm currently seeing a therapist 3 times a week who assures me that leaving behind what causes me pain is the first step. Emotional turmoil persists. Writing here for distraction was suggested by my younger brother. My sister-in-law disclosed everything out of guilt, seeing me happy with my son while knowing he might not be mine. The revelation occurred during a moment of weakness when we visited her, causing her to break down with guilt. I harbor tremendous hatred for my wife and conflicting feelings of pain and resentment towards the child. Despite this, I am determined to move forward. I hope the divorce proceeds smoothly since we have separate finances and properties. If she seeks child support, I have proof of the child's paternity, which, according to my lawyer, should suffice in any legal process. My therapist advises against seeing either the child or my wife, emphasizing the importance of focusing on my well-being first. The child is no longer my responsibility, and accepting this reality is crucial for my emotional recovery. Update: not much of significance has occurred, but here's a brief summary. About 3 days after my post, my ex visited my house and requested entry. I went out to meet her at the door, stating firmly that she wouldn't set foot in my house while I'm present. If she had anything to say, it should be at the door. She practically begged me to take her son back, acknowledging that cutting off all contact was my prerogative. She expressed that she deserved it, but raising a child alone would jeopardize her dream of becoming a notary. Working in public record, she's 2 years away from pursuing a vacancy in the judiciary to achieve her notary goal. I tried to explain calmly that my therapist recommended cutting off all contact with both of them, asking her to leave before I lose my composure. Despite my love for the child, I won't direct my anger at an innocent, especially one born out of her actions. I expressed this with some anger but never raised my voice, since we were on the street, emphasizing that the child deserves better and she is currently responsible for providing that. Afterward, we talked a bit more. She resisted the urge to cry or make a scene, considering we were on the street and she values others' opinions. The last thing she asked was to at least let her see the dogs. I declined, believing it's best for them to get used to her absence, as seeing her after so much time would only make them euphoric. After that, she nodded and left. 2 days later, she called me upon receiving the divorce papers. My mistake was answering, and after about 30 minutes of yelling, I directed her to contact my civil lawyer for any questions. I then silenced her number. She hasn't come to my house or tried to call again. On the same day, I contacted a friend from my master's program and suggested going out. She accepted, and we've been going out since then. Finally, last Friday, I proposed being an exclusive couple, which she accepted. She has stayed overnight at my house for a few days already, familiar with and adoring my dogs. I appreciate this since I couldn't start something with someone who doesn't accept my pets. We are currently taking things easy. She understands the drama I'm having with my ex and the child, respecting my decision. She asked if I will ever have contact with the child again. I told her maybe when he is of age to understand my decisions, but I don't expect it to interfere with my life in the future. She nodded, glad that I prioritize myself during this process. Maybe. This took a little longer than I expected, but this is the summary of what happened these days, and well, final update to put it plainly, I'm now officially divorced. In my country, there's a streamlined divorce process known as a quick divorce, applicable when there are no shared assets, joint finances, or children involved. This type of divorce takes place at the municipal level, bypassing the judicial proceedings that typically include reconciliation, asset distribution, and more. As you might have guessed, the sole complication was our shared son. The matter of the paternity test arose, confirming that the child isn't mine and my name was successfully removed from his birth certificate, leaving him with both of his mother's last names. Describing the divorce process as challenging is an understatement. My ex-wife attempted multiple times to exploit our child's mental state to lure me back, but recollecting everything that transpired helped me stay focused. Gratitude is due to my current partner, who consistently supported me. While I understand it's not my fault, hearing it from her also played a role in helping me. After numerous discussions involving our lawyers, I proposed covering half of a nanny's salary for her son while she gets her life back on track. Fortunately, she agreed to cover the remaining expenses entirely on her own. I made it clear that I wouldn't be taking care of her son, and she agreed. Being devoted to her work, adapting to single motherhood seems to have been a significant shock for her. Out of curiosity, I asked if she spoke with the child's father. She tried, and he even lived with them for 2 weeks at her parents' house, but they simply had nothing in common, leading to conflicts. She had to intervene to prevent them from shouting at each other, and after a couple of weeks, he left. While somewhat sad, she is a woman with a good job and figure with a year of nanny assistance. She has ample time to find a suitable stepfather for her son. Meanwhile, I don't plan to talk to him yet, perhaps in a couple of years or when he's a teenager. If the child doesn't wish to talk to me, I won't insist, understanding if he harbors resentment. Discussing the child led to her expressing hatred towards me, particularly for having a new partner. Quickly, I found it rude, especially since my current partner was present, and I had to intervene in an argument between the two. Despite signing the divorce papers and acknowledging my help, she couldn't bear that throughout the conversation I maintained a compassionate demeanor. She has always been proud, achieving everything through her merit, and my look seemed to hurt and anger her. I clarified that it was the same look as always if she has a paranoia problem. It's not my concern. The important thing is, she signed the papers, and I can finally move on with my life. For a year, I'll be paying half the minimum wage for a nanny a fair price for peace. Despite harboring negative feelings, I accepted it and moved forward. This month, yes, I still resent her, but not enough to express it directly or wish her ill. She has enough problems to deal with. I appreciate my current partner for enduring all this. More than once, I told her she didn't have to accompany me or worry about it, but she insists that my problems are hers too, and that I shouldn't carry the burden alone. It has been a tremendous help in lightening my load. She also understands my reluctance to rush into marriage this year or possibly the next, and I appreciate her understanding. At least this chapter of my life is about to close without long-term consequences for me. Third story: married for 16 years, together for 20, and parents of 3 children. I uncovered her affair by hacking her phone and reading messages. She engaged in an affair with a coworker, terminated it, and attempted to repair our marriage, but it was unsuccessful. I filed for divorce in October 2018. She moved out in November 2018 and promptly resumed her relationship with her affair partner. Our divorce was finalized in December 2019, and she remained with her affair partner until last week. Tearfully, my ex called, asking if I could take the kids overnight. Concerned, I inquired about what was wrong. She replied that karma had struck her hard. Sensing something awry, she went through her affair partner's phone while he was in the shower, discovering an extensive string of explicit Facebook messages, akin to how I discovered her affair. My ex is, and his new affair partner is a married year-old. Now, don't get me wrong, he initially wanted to celebrate this turn of events. From the beginning, I warned her that the guy was a predator. However, after hearing her out, I realized she was genuinely in love with him, and part of me felt sorry for her. Ironically, she apologized more on that day than ever before for the pain she caused me, expressing remorse for the hurt I endured. Taking it with a grain of salt, I've moved on and found happiness with someone else over the last 6 months. Update: there was nearly a second instance of infidelity with the affair partner AP, but my ex caught him before they could arrange a meeting. She has complete control over his phone, monitoring all his apps, and checking his messages constantly. It sounds like a nightmare to me. My ex and the AP still have a peculiar on and off relationship. Let me delve into that a bit. Officially, they are not together. According to her, both of their Facebook pages are listed as single. She occasionally wears his engagement ring, and I'm pretty sure she would return it. Unlike her refusal with my $12,000 wedding ring. She stays at his apartment occasionally but claims they just hang out as friends. Why? Because don't we all spend the night at our ex's place, sleep in their bed, and just hang out? I'm still amused that she thinks everyone is naive like that. Meanwhile, she had to change jobs because of her. Close friendship with the plant manager at her previous workplace. They were always talking, going to lunch, taking Harley rides, walks on breaks, etc. Rumors started flying, and things got messy there. Her work friend is married with 3 kids. He still visits her on occasion and takes her on a Harley ride to a movie or whatever. She was apparently caught by our teenage son kissing someone in the driveway. Our son didn't know who this person was and called me to ask. I told him to ask his mother who that was and played dumb. He was under the impression that she and the AP were still together because he was just over the day before, grilling out and mowing her lawn. Another new guy appears. She won't disclose how or where she met him. They went on 2 dates and she didn't seem into him. They knew each other from a previous job, and he kept saying how he wanted to be with all her friends and co-workers back in the day. We were talking the other day about retirement. She knows my plan is to semi-retire in 6 years, as soon as I'm done with child support and all of my kids are 18. I plan to relocate south to a warmer climate. She gave me a sob story about how she had to raise all of our children while I built a business, and how she'll probably have to work till she's dead and never retire. That is so far from the truth. I put in just as much time, housework, and effort into our family as she did. For a few years, I did even more than her while she was out partying with her friends 4 or 5 nights a week. My response to her was, "You made your choice to leave me and go with your AP." Her facial response was glorious to see. I was her retirement plan. She now has a whopping $14,000 in her 401k for retirement, and she is in her early 42nds. Even if she stays or goes back or whatever she is doing with her AP, he makes okay money, has no savings, little retirement, and doesn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. So there is some karma in that. My thought to pass on to all of you going through a divorce or on the verge of one is this. My life was torn apart from October 2018 to December 2019 when our divorce was final. Fast forward a few years to now and I'm happier than I have ever been. I am looking to retire early and enjoy some beach time. My relationship with my kids has never been stronger or better. When things look so dark and terrible, be a good person. Don't lie or deceive. Don't try to be malicious or involve the kids between you and him or her. Keep your head up and keep walking. The farther you can walk away from the darkness, the better your life will be. Stay strong, my friends. You got this.
Welcome back to the Cheating Tales Lab. First of all, a huge thank you for helping us reach 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all for your amazing support. To celebrate, we're launching our second channel, Infidelity Tales Lab, where you'll get 1-day early access to all our stories plus exclusive, original cheating wife stories you won't find anywhere else. You can subscribe now by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment, or simply search for Infidelity Tales Lab on YouTube. Don't miss out. Subscribe and listen to exclusive stories. You won't regret subscribing. Now let's begin the story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculate kitchen of the Clark residence as Nathan observed the caterers setting up for his son Spencer's graduation party. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches with steel gray eyes and the composed demeanor that had served him well through countless surgeries, Nathan reached for his coffee while maintaining a careful watch on the scene unfolding before him. The head caterer approached him with a clipboard. "Dr. Clark, where would you like the seafood station?" "The west side of the pool area should work well," Nathan replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned him respect in both the operating room and boardroom. "Just ensure it's under the awning to avoid direct sunlight." Through the kitchen window, he caught sight of his wife Marilyn directing the decoration team. 25 years of marriage had taught him to read the subtle tells in her movements, the slightly too precise gestures, the artificial brightness of her smile. At 52, Marilyn still turned heads with her tennis-toned figure and carefully maintained appearance, but Nathan had long since learned to see past the polished surface. "Nathan?" Marilyn's voice carried that familiar edge of urgency as she swept into the kitchen, her designer sundress rustling. "Could you help with the decorations inside? The living room still needs attention." Before Nathan could respond, his brother Howard emerged from the pool area, his casual demeanor just a shade too calculated. "I've got the backyard handled," Howard added quickly, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Those string lights won't hang themselves." Nathan nodded, maintaining his neutral expression even as his hand brushed against the phone in his pocket. The device silently recorded, a practice he'd adopted over the past year on the advice of Clay Maloney, the ex-military security consultant who'd first raised concerns about irregular patterns in Marilyn's behavior and suspicious financial transactions. Dr. Clark, Sarah Chun, one of the nurses from his practice, approached with a stack of paperwork. I hate to interrupt, but these surgical schedules need your approval before Monday. Of course, Sarah. Nathan gestured toward the kitchen island, noting how Marilyn's smile tightened at the interruption. Let's review them now. As Sarah spread out the documents, Nathan caught the flash of irritation that crossed Howard's face. His brother had always been the more personable one, content with his role as hospital administrator while Nathan pursued his surgical career. Now, watching Howard's hand brush against Marilyn's arm in what might appear to be an innocent gesture, Nathan reflected on how that congeniality had served as the perfect cover. Dad! Spencer's voice carried across the kitchen as he bounded in, all 6 feet of youthful energy barely contained in his graduation suit. Can you help me with something? It's about the medical school application. Nathan studied his son's face, so like his own, or so he'd always thought. What's on your mind? It's the personal statement, Spencer began, leading Nathan toward his study. I want to mention the volunteer work at the hospital, but I'm not sure how to frame it. Through the study window, Nathan had a clear view of the pool area. He watched as Howard reappeared, moving with too much familiarity in a space that wasn't his home. The security cameras Clay had installed 6 months ago would be capturing every moment. Spencer, Nathan said carefully, why don't you tell me about the hospital volunteering? All of it. His son shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean? The hours you logged when I was in surgery. The time you spent with Uncle Howard. Spencer's phone buzzed, his girlfriend Katie's name flashing on the screen. I should take this, he muttered, relief evident in his voice as he stepped out of the study. Nathan returned to the kitchen, timing his movements precisely. The caterers had moved outside, leaving the space momentarily empty. Through the window, he watched as Howard pulled Marilyn close behind a decorative trellis, their kiss speaking of years of practiced deception. Nathan's hand tightened on his coffee cup, but his expression remained impassive. 20 years of performing high-stakes surgery had taught him the value of steady hands and careful timing. Marilyn's laugh carried across the yard, sharp and triumphant. 20 years of family vacations, and you really thought we were just close in-laws, she was saying to Howard, unaware of Nathan's presence at the window. The best cover is hiding in plain sight, Howard replied, his hand lingering on her waist. Nathan was always too busy saving lives to notice what was happening in his own home. They turned, finally spotting Nathan at the window. Instead of shame or guilt, Marilyn's expression showed only arrogant satisfaction. Well, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the open window. I suppose the charade can finally end. Even the kids call him Daddy when you're not around. Nathan? Spencer appeared beside Nathan, his face a mix of defiance and guilt. Sorry, Dad, but we had to choose sides a long time ago. Uncle Howard was always there while you were at the hospital. He came to my games, helped with homework. Nathan smiled, reaching into his jacket pocket where Clay's USB drive sat heavy with evidence. Interesting choice, he said quietly, his tone making Spencer take an involuntary step back. Let's discuss your definition of family. Oh, please, Marilyn scoffed, striding into the kitchen with Howard close behind. Are we really going to have a scene at Spencer's graduation party? How typically dramatic of you, Nathan. Dramatic? Nathan's voice remained level as he turned to face them. I'd say 20 years of systematic deception is rather dramatic, wouldn't you, Howard? Although I suppose managing 2 families must have required quite the performance. Howard's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. You were never here, always at the hospital, always in surgery. Someone had to be there for Marilyn, for Spencer. Someone had to help themselves to my family, you mean? Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. And my accounts? The offshore transfers were a nice touch. Did you think being hospital administrator meant I wouldn't notice the financial irregularities? You're delusional, Marilyn snapped, but her hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Howard has been more of a husband and father than you ever were. Has he? Nathan removed his phone from his pocket, playing a recording. Howard's voice filled the kitchen, discussing account numbers and transfer dates with Marilyn. Spencer's face paled. Mom? What's he talking about? Your mother and uncle have been very busy, Nathan said calmly. But then, you've known that for years, haven't you, Spencer? Those summer internships at the hospital weren't just about padding your medical school application. You bastard, Howard snarled, taking a step forward. You've been spying on us? Gathering evidence, Nathan corrected. There's a difference. Though I suppose ethics was never your strong suit, brother. Marilyn's laugh turned bitter. And what are you going to do with this supposed evidence? Ruin your son's graduation party? Destroy our family's reputation? Our family? Nathan's voice carried a dangerous edge. No, Marilyn. This stopped being our family a long time ago. You made your choice. He turned to Spencer. And so did you. Dad, please, Spencer began. But Nathan cut him off. Save it. The party's over. Nathan moved toward the door, his voice carrying clearly. Enjoy your celebration. Tomorrow, we begin discussing consequences. The silence that followed him was broken only by the sound of Marilyn's wine glass shattering against the kitchen floor. Nathan walked to his car, his steps measured and calm. In his pocket, his phone continued recording, capturing the panicked conversation that erupted behind him. Clay was waiting in a black SUV across the street, his military training evident in his alert posture. Everything recorded, Dr. Clark? Every word. Nathan slid into the passenger seat. Contact Morrison. Tell him to prepare the legal documents for tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp, Clay confirmed, starting the engine. The security team will have the house monitored all night. Nathan nodded, watching through the tinted windows as Howard emerged from the house, gesturing angrily as he spoke on his phone. 20 years of betrayal would end with precision timing, just like every surgery Nathan had ever performed. One more thing, Nathan added as they pulled away from the curb. Contact the hospital board. I think it's time for an emergency meeting about financial irregularities in the administration. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a sharp contrast to the storm about to break. Nathan arrived at precisely 8 a.m., Morrison's leather briefcase in one hand and Clay's USB drive in the other. Marilyn answered the door in her silk robe, her careful makeup not quite hiding the signs of a sleepless night. What's this? Her hand trembled as she took the envelope Nathan held out. Divorce papers, he replied calmly, sliding the USB drive across the kitchen counter. And this contains 20 years of surveillance footage, phone recordings, and bank transfers. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the money moving to offshore accounts? You can't prove anything, Marilyn snapped, but her face had gone pale as she stared at the drive. Every family vacation, every business trip with Howard, Spencer's college fund transfers. It's all there. Nathan stood, straightening his suit jacket. You have 1 hour to leave the house. The locks change at 9. You can't do this. Marilyn's voice rose. This is my home. Was your home? Nathan corrected. Morrison will explain the temporary restraining order. I'd suggest reading it carefully, especially the part about electronic communications and financial transactions. I'll fight you, she hissed. Howard and I both will. You'll lose everything. Nathan paused at the door, looking back at the woman he'd once loved. No, Marilyn, you already lost everything. You just didn't know it until now. As he walked to his car, Nathan heard Marilyn's angry sobs through the open window, but his steps didn't falter. In the surgical theater, hesitation meant death. In life, he'd learned, it meant something worse, the slow death of dignity and self-respect. His phone buzzed, a text from Clay confirming that Howard had just received similar papers at his home. Nathan smiled as he started his car. The first incision had been made. Now it was time to excise the cancer that had grown in his life, with the same precision he'd used to save countless patients. The war was just beginning, but Nathan Clark had never lost a battle he was prepared for. And he'd been preparing for this one for a very long time. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Ian McKinney's polished conference table as Howard paced the room. 1 week had passed since Nathan's devastating revelation, and the hospital administrator's usually confident demeanor had given way to barely contained panic. He is everything, Howard muttered, running his hands through his disheveled hair. The recordings, The transfers. Sit down, McKinney commanded, his reputation for aggressive divorce tactics evident in his shark-like smile. This isn't my first case involving surveillance. Your brother may think he's clever, but you don't know Nathan, Marilyn interrupted, her designer outfit failing to hide the strain of the past week. He doesn't make moves unless he's certain of the outcome. McKinney leaned forward, his expensive suit creaking. Then we change the game. Attack his reputation, his credibility. The controlling husband, obsessed with surveillance, fabricating evidence out of paranoia. The hospital board, Howard's eyes lit up. I've built relationships there for years. Nathan's always been the outsider, focused on his surgeries. Perfect. McKinney began typing on his laptop. I'll draft a statement suggesting psychological evaluation. Question his fitness to practice. Marilyn's laugh held a bitter edge. Nathan, unfit? He's performed more successful surgeries than any other doctor in the state. Success can feed obsession, McKinney countered. Howard, set up a board meeting. Make it seem like you're concerned about your brother's mental state. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following day. Howard stood before the gathered members, his performance carefully calibrated to project worried sincerity. Nathan's always been obsessed with control, Howard told the assembled board members, his voice carrying just the right note of reluctant concern. These accusations, they're fabrications born from his inability to handle Marilyn's independence. Dr. Wade Rhodes, the board chairman who'd been quietly supporting Howard's administrative decisions for years, nodded sympathetically. These are serious concerns, Howard. Perhaps a mandatory leave of absence. The boardroom door opened. Nathan walked in, Clay Maloney's imposing figure following with a laptop. Perfect timing. Nathan's voice cut through the murmurs. I was hoping to discuss some financial irregularities myself. Howard's face paled. This is a closed meeting. About my mental health? Nathan smiled, the expression reminiscent of a surgeon before making the first incision. Interesting timing, considering what Clay found in the hospital's auxiliary accounts. Clay connected the laptop to the presentation screen. Numbers began scrolling, followed by recordings. Howard's voice filled the room, discussing fund transfers with Wade Rhodes. Just move it through the equipment budget, Howard was saying. Nathan's too busy in surgery to notice. Rhodes' face turned ashen as his own voice appeared. The board audit won't catch it if we... I think, Nathan said into the silence that followed. We should discuss a different kind of leave of absence. The next few weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated surgery. Each revelation was timed for maximum impact, each piece of evidence deployed with precision. During a particularly tense deposition, Spencer sat across from Nathan, his expensive shirt wrinkled from hours of questioning. You don't understand, Dad, Spencer pleaded, his facade of defiance cracking. Mom and Uncle Howard said you'd destroy everyone if you ever found out. They said you were dangerous. Nathan studied the young man he'd raised, seeing now the subtle resemblances to Howard that he'd overlooked for years. No, son, they were the dangerous ones, and you chose their side. They needed help hiding the transfers, Spencer continued, his voice small. Just small things at first, when I was 15. Running errands, delivering documents. Fraud doesn't start with large crimes, Nathan replied, his tone clinical. It starts with small betrayals, justified by convenient lies. The legal proceedings revealed layers of deception that even Nathan hadn't anticipated. Marilyn had been systematically draining accounts since Spencer's 10th birthday. Howard had used his position as hospital administrator to cover financial irregularities that went beyond their affair. The evidence mounted, each revelation more damning than the last. During a settlement negotiation, Marilyn's mask of sophistication finally cracked. You're enjoying this, she spat across the conference table. Destroying everything we built. Everything you stole, Nathan corrected calmly. There's a difference. We had a life before you became obsessed with your career, she countered. Howard was there when you were playing hero in the operating room. Playing hero? Nathan's laugh held no humor. While I was saving lives, you were stealing from those same patients. The foundation funds, Marilyn. Did you think I wouldn't find those transfers? Howard slammed his hand on the table. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than everyone else, up in your surgical tower. Better?
No.
Nathan sliding a document across the table. Just more thorough. This is a complete audit of the hospital's charitable foundation. The board received a copy this morning. Howard's face went from red to white as he scanned the pages. You can't. The medical board received it too, Nathan continued. They're particularly interested in the cancer research funds. Tell me, Howard, how many trials were delayed because you diverted their funding? The investigation moved quickly after that. Howard's medical license was suspended pending a full review. Marilyn's carefully cultivated social circle evaporated as evidence of her manipulations became public. Spencer, his college fund frozen due to evidence of his involvement in the financial fraud, watched his carefully planned future crumble. Nathan's divorce proceedings moved with the same precision he brought to his surgeries. Each attempt by Marilyn to claim assets was met with documented evidence of her deception. Howard's efforts to maintain his position at the hospital collapsed under the weight of forensic accounting. You could show some mercy, Howard attempted during their final confrontation at the hospital. We're still brothers. Nathan's voice could have frosted glass. You betrayed my trust, stole from my patients, and corrupted my son. Biology doesn't excuse that. The patients were never at risk, Howard protested weakly. The funds were always. 6 months, Nathan cut him off. 6 months of delayed cancer trials because you diverted their funding. How many lives were affected by those delays, Howard? The hospital board's decision was unanimous. Howard's termination was followed by a referral to the state medical board for ethics violations. His career in hospital administration was effectively over. Marilyn's attempts to salvage her reputation fared no better. Her friends, many of them hospital board members' wives, turned their backs as evidence emerged of her systematic manipulation. I hear she tried to join the country club committee, Nathan overheard one nurse telling another. They wouldn't even take her application. After what she did to those charity funds, the second nurse replied. She's lucky she's not in jail. The final blow came when Nathan's lawyers revealed the extent of Spencer's involvement. The trust fund transfers, the falsified volunteer hours, the years of small betrayals that had grown into significant fraud. He was just a kid when they started grooming him, Clay observed during one of their strategy sessions. Old enough to know right from wrong, Nathan replied, reviewing another set of documents. Old enough to make choices. Within months, the war Nathan had prepared for was effectively over. Howard's medical license suspension was heading toward permanent revocation. Marilyn's divorce settlement left her with only what she'd brought into the marriage, which proved to be far less than she'd claimed. As Nathan sat in his office, reviewing the final settlement documents, he reflected on the precision with which everything had unfolded. Like a complex surgery, each step had been planned, each potential complication anticipated. His phone buzzed, a message from Clay about Howard's latest desperate attempt to salvage his career. Trying to claim rights to your research patents, the message read. Should I release the evidence about his attempted data theft? Nathan smiled, thinking of the backup files he'd maintained for years, documenting every suspicious access to his research databases. Release everything, he typed back. It's time to close this procedure. The sun was setting over the city as Nathan signed the final divorce decree. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he could appreciate the completeness of the operation he'd just concluded. Some cancers required aggressive treatment, and he'd just excised one from his life with surgical precision. 3 years passed like well-planned surgical procedures, precise, methodical, and with predictable outcomes. Nathan Clark stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse overlooking the city, watching the sunset paint the skyline in shades of amber. His reflection showed a man who had emerged stronger from betrayal, his steel-gray hair now a distinguished silver at the temples, his posture that of someone who commanded respect rather than demanded it. The notification sound from his laptop drew his attention back to his desk, where the quarterly reports from his private practice showed numbers that would make any hospital administrator envious. Not that Howard would know. Nathan's former brother now worked at a small-town clinic in Nebraska, his medical career a shadow of its former glory. Dr. Clark? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Hannah Reynolds is here for your 6 p.m. meeting. Nathan smiled, a genuine expression that had become more frequent in recent months. "Send her in, Sarah." Hannah entered with the confident stride of someone who spent their days making split-second decisions in the trauma unit. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her scrubs replaced by casual business attire that spoke of a woman who understood both operating rooms and boardrooms. "Quarterly numbers look good," she noted, glancing at his screen, "though I'm more interested in dinner. I've got an hour before I'm back on call." Their relationship had developed naturally over the past year, built on shared understanding of dedication and integrity. Hannah had been chief of trauma surgery when the truth about Howard's mismanagement of hospital funds came to light. "Italian?" Nathan suggested, reaching for his jacket. "There's a new place downtown that—" His phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender's name made him pause. "Spencer Clark. I need to see you. It's important." Hannah read the message over his shoulder, her expression concerned. "Are you going to respond?" "Yes," Nathan replied, his voice neutral. This was inevitable. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Nathan sat behind his desk, watching Spencer approach through the office windows. His once son looked older than his 21 years, the expensive clothes replaced by worn jeans and a shabby jacket. "I need help with college tuition," Spencer began without preamble, dropping into the chair across from Nathan. "Mom and Howard can't." "Before you continue," Nathan interrupted, opening his desk drawer to remove 2 sealed envelopes. "Read these." Spencer's hands trembled slightly as he opened the first envelope. The DNA test results were clear, clinical in their devastation. The second envelope contained transcripts, years of recorded conversations between Spencer, Howard, and Marilyn, plotting their deceptions. "Howard is your biological father," Nathan said quietly, watching the color drain from Spencer's face. "Has been since before you were born. That's why you had to choose sides. You were always on his side. Dad." Spencer's face crumpled, the arrogance of graduation day long gone. "I'm not your dad. I never was. That was your first betrayal, letting me believe I was. We didn't. I didn't know until—" "Until when?" Nathan's voice remained steady. "When did you start helping them hide evidence?" 15, wasn't it? Old enough to know right from wrong." Spencer slumped in his chair. "Mom said you'd help with tuition. Said you wouldn't want your reputation damaged by having your son drop out of college." "My reputation?" Nathan's laugh held no warmth. "My reputation is built on integrity, Spencer. Something you, Howard, and Marilyn never understood." "Howard lost everything," Spencer protested. "The clinic barely pays enough for them to survive. Mom had to sell her jewelry just—" "Actions have consequences," Nathan cut him off. "Your mother's social circle evaporated because she stole from their charity foundations. Howard's medical license was suspended because he diverted cancer research funds. Your college fund was frozen because you helped them hide the evidence. These aren't tragedies, Spencer. They're justice. So that's it? You're just going to let your—" Spencer caught himself. "Let me drop out of college?" Nathan reached for another folder. "These are the names of every cancer patient whose treatment was delayed because Howard diverted research funds. Read them. Understand what your real father did to people who trusted him with their lives." Spencer's hands shook as he scanned the list. "I didn't know." "You knew enough," Nathan replied. "Now you know more. Consider it your final lesson from me." As Spencer left the office, Nathan felt no remorse. His phone buzzed with a message from Hannah about dinner plans. On his desk, a photo of his new charitable foundation's first scholarship recipients, all children of cancer patients, reminded him that family wasn't always about blood. That evening, over dinner at their favorite restaurant, Hannah watched him with understanding eyes. "Spencer came by the trauma unit today," she said. "Asked if I could talk to you about reconsidering. And I told him that integrity isn't negotiable." Hannah's smile was fierce. He didn't like that answer. Nathan nodded, appreciating once again how well she understood him. Their relationship had grown from mutual respect into something deeper, built on shared values rather than decades of lies. The next morning brought news that Howard and Marilyn had made one final attempt to claim part of Nathan's new medical patents. The attempt failed spectacularly when Nathan's lawyers revealed evidence of Howard's previous attempts to steal research data. They never learn, Clay Maloney commented, dropping the legal documents on Nathan's desk. Still trying to take what isn't theirs. Old habits, Nathan replied, signing the final restraining order that would prevent any future contact. How's the foundation doing? First round of scholarships went out last week. The board's impressed with how you've turned Howard's fraud into something positive. Nathan looked out over the city he now called home. The view from his office reminded him of how far he'd come from that afternoon by the pool, watching his world unravel. He'd lost a family built on lies but gained something more valuable, the truth about loyalty and the strength to stand alone rather than compromise his principles. Later that evening, dining with Hannah at his penthouse, Nathan realized something profound. She was discussing a complicated trauma case, her passion for saving lives matching his own dedication to his patients. Here was someone who understood that sometimes the best revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about rebuilding something stronger from the ashes of betrayal. "You're quiet tonight," Hannah observed, pouring another glass of wine. "Just thinking about choices," Nathan replied. "And consequences. Regrets?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "No," Nathan said firmly, "just appreciation for truth. It's cleaner than comfortable lies." His phone buzzed one final time, a notification that Howard's attempt to appeal his license suspension had been denied. Nathan silenced the phone without reading the full message. Some chapters needed to stay closed. The city lights sparkled below, a testament to life moving forward. Nathan had rebuilt his world with the same precision he brought to his surgeries, cutting out the cancer of betrayal and ensuring it could never grow back. The emptiness of loss had been filled with something better: integrity, purpose, and the knowledge that sometimes the strongest families were the ones you chose, not the ones you were born into. As Hannah discussed plans for expanding the Foundation's scholarship program, Nathan felt the last pieces of his old life fade into irrelevance. He had excised the cancer of betrayal from his life with surgical precision, and in its place, he had built something far more valuable: a life founded on truth, supported by integrity, and enriched by genuine connections. The price of betrayal had been high, but the rewards of honesty were proving to be worth every painful incision along the way. Epilogue: 5 years after the reckoning. The small-town clinic in Nebraska where Howard now worked barely resembled the prestigious hospital he once administered. The peeling paint and outdated equipment served as daily reminders of his fall from grace. At 58, his once commanding presence had deteriorated into that of a bitter man who treated routine cases of flu and minor injuries. "Dr. Andrews, your next patient is waiting," the receptionist called out, deliberately using Howard's mother's maiden name. After the scandal, he'd been forced to change it. The Clark name carried too much weight in medical circles, all of it negative. His office, a cramped room with fluorescent lighting, contained newspaper clippings he obsessively collected about Nathan's continued success. The most recent showed Nathan receiving a humanitarian award for his charitable foundation's work in providing medical care to underprivileged children. Marilyn, now showing every day of her 55 years, worked as a receptionist at a local dentist's office. Her designer clothes had been replaced by discount store finds, her once perfect manicures now chipped and self-maintained. The other wives in town whispered about her past, the story of her betrayal having followed them even to this remote corner of Nebraska. "Did you see the society pages?" Marilyn asked Howard that evening in their rented 2-bedroom apartment. "Nathan and Hannah's foundation just opened another free clinic. They're expecting their first child." Howard's hand trembled as he poured himself another drink. "Leave it alone, Marilyn." But she couldn't. The laptop screen showed photos from a recent charity gala. Nathan distinguished in a tuxedo, Hannah elegantly showing her pregnancy. The article detailed their work: 3 free clinics, a scholarship program for medical students from underprivileged backgrounds, and a research foundation focusing on pediatric cancer, funded partially by the settlement money from Howard's fraud case. Their own son, Spencer, had eventually completed his community college degree through night classes while working as a pharmacy technician. He tried reaching out to Nathan once more 2 years ago, sending a congratulatory email when Nathan and Hannah's wedding was announced. The email bounced back, Nathan's lawyers maintained a strict no-contact policy. Clay Maloney, whose security firm now handled all of Nathan's charitable organizations, had established a comprehensive monitoring system. Any attempts by Howard, Marilyn, or Spencer to approach Nathan or his new family resulted in immediate legal consequences. "Remember Sandra's wedding invitation?" Marilyn muttered, referring to her former best friend. The invitation had been returned unopened. Her once vast social circle had contracted to a few other disgraced individuals they'd met in Nebraska. Howard's ex-wife Linda had thrived after their divorce. She'd used her settlement to open a successful wellness center, her social media showing frequent trips to Europe and a new husband who looked at her with genuine devotion. She'd even been invited to Nathan and Hannah's wedding. The hospital board chairman, Wade Rhodes, had resigned in disgrace after Nathan's evidence exposed the full extent of the financial fraud. He occasionally saw Howard at medical conferences for small regional clinics, both men avoiding eye contact, their name tags displaying different surnames than the ones they'd worn in their prime. Sarah Chin, the nurse who'd worked with Nathan for years, had been promoted to chief nursing officer at his private practice. She took particular satisfaction in returning any messages from Howard or Marilyn with a form letter citing the no-contact policy. "We should never have tried to claim those patents," Marilyn said, closing the laptop. Their last attempt to grab at Nathan's success had resulted in their lawyer dropping them as clients and another hefty fine they were still paying off. Howard's medical license remained restricted, requiring annual reviews and limiting the procedures he could perform. The small-town clinic tolerated him because they were desperately understaffed, but his colleagues maintained a professional distance, the whispers about his past following him through the corridors. Meanwhile, Nathan and Hannah's life exemplified everything Howard and Marilyn had lost. Their private practice had expanded to 3 locations, each specializing in different aspects of surgery and trauma care. The charitable foundation, named after one of the cancer patients whose treatment had been delayed by Howard's fraud, provided hope to families facing medical crises. Clay's security reports, which he still maintained out of professional thoroughness, painted a pathetic picture of the conspirators' lives. Spencer worked double shifts to afford a small apartment, his dreams of medical school permanently shattered. He'd tried dating, but background checks by potential in-laws inevitably uncovered his past, ending relationships before they could develop. Marilyn's attempts to maintain appearances grew more desperate each year. Her hair dye couldn't quite cover the gray. Her makeup couldn't hide the bitter lines around her mouth. The local society wives excluded her from their events, her past making her a liability to their reputations. The final insult had come when Howard's mother changed her will before passing away, leaving her estate to a medical scholarship fund administered by Nathan's foundation. She'd included a letter, made public as part of the bequest, expressing her shame at Howard's actions and her hope that Nathan's work would help repair some of the damage her son had caused. Nathan and Hannah welcomed their daughter, Grace Integrity Clark, in the spring. The birth announcement in the medical journal included a note about a new pediatric wing being opened in her honor. Howard saw the announcement during his lunch break, his hands shaking so badly he spilled coffee on his worn dress shirt. The contrast between the lives they'd chosen could not have been starker. Nathan had built his success on integrity and dedication, while Howard and Marilyn's betrayal had earned them a harvest of consequences they couldn't escape. Every day brought fresh reminders of their fall. Rejected credit cards, unanswered social invitations, professional doors firmly closed. Clay's latest security report sat on Nathan's desk, untouched. He no longer needed to read about their struggles. His focus remained on the future, the expanding medical practice, the growing foundation, his new family built on trust rather than lies. The price of betrayal had been high, but only for those who had chosen to betray. Nathan's new life stood as testament to the power of integrity, while Howard and Marilyn's served as a cautionary tale whispered in hospital corridors and country club lounges. Some choices carry consequences that last a lifetime. In the end, their greatest punishment wasn't the loss of money or status. It was having to watch from a distance as Nathan built something far greater than what they had tried to steal, knowing they had no one to blame but themselves.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
During my gap year from college, I fell deeply in love with a woman I met while working a part-time job. She was about the age of my mother. To this day, I find myself naturally drawn to older women, an inclination I can't seem to avoid. I had taken a year off after my junior year of college. With graduation looming, I faced the daunting prospect of entering the job market unprepared. Having focused solely on my studies up until then, I decided to take a break to prepare for certification and catch up on my studies. During my gap year, I lived diligently according to plan, meeting up with friends who were also taking time off, encouraging each other along the way. Once I had accomplished what I set out to do, I found myself with some spare time. That's when my aunt, who owned a restaurant a couple of hours away from our house, reached out. Knowing I was preparing to return to school, she asked for my help with the restaurant. Despite the restaurant's reputation as a culinary destination, attracting customers from far and wide, I hesitated, anticipating the hard work it entailed. However, the promise of being paid as well as a long-standing employee convinced me to pack my bags and head to her town. Working in the restaurant was relentless. It was financially rewarding but physically demanding. The work never seemed to end, from cleaning, ordering and preparing ingredients, washing dishes, greeting customers, managing reviews, to overseeing staff. My aunt worked tirelessly. I primarily served tables, a task made easier by my previous experience in the field. I was quick to respond to customers' calls. My aunt prioritized the staff's health, providing vitamins and treating everyone to a meal on good days. Believing that well-treated employees would work harder and provide better service, she was a savvy business owner who knew how to manage people effectively. On rare occasions when the restaurant was empty, we would close early and take a break. She treated her staff like family, always ensuring we had fresh seasonal fruit and snacks. Despite any possible complaints, her efforts led to high sales every day. Now, let me tell you about my Aunt Annalise, who left a lasting impression on me. When I arrived at her restaurant, Aunt Annalise was in her late 40s. My aunt worked in the kitchen. I heard she's been on her own since her husband left. She got married young, and her kids are all grown up now, working and living their own lives. She mentioned that her children are financially independent, so she could work just for fun if she wanted, but she's healthy and still wants to work hard as long as she's able. I didn't have any friends at my aunt's restaurant, and after finishing work, I found myself bored. But I knew I'd be going home soon, so instead of trying to make a girlfriend, I just surfed the internet or played some games to cool off. There was this one day at Aunt Annalise's restaurant. After I got used to the restaurant work, I decided to stay overnight in the adjacent living quarters. Aunt Annalise told me I could help myself to the main course leftovers if I got hungry late at night. That evening, I was sitting in the restaurant, drinking beer with my meal. Preparing to close, Aunt Annalise saw me drinking alone and suggested we chat, saying it looked lonely to drink by myself. Aunt Annalise was not only good in the kitchen, but she was also a beauty that would make customers take a second look when she was in the dining area. I thought it was amazing how such a beauty spent her day in front of a hot stove. Aunt Annalise then grabbed several bottles of beer from the fridge and started telling her story. She met her husband in her early 20s and got pregnant, which led to their marriage. The first few years were truly happy. Then one day, A woman called her, claiming she had been with her husband since her late teens, knew about their marriage, and now wanted her man back. It turned out her husband had been seeing another woman all this time, and this woman acted as if she were his wife, which was shocking to Aunt Annalise. Her husband had been leading a double life with this woman since high school. Although they had no children together, Aunt Annalise couldn't bring herself to leave him immediately because of their children, so she endured and lived as if they were still married until the kids were grown. Despite having no other skills to be financially independent, her husband shamelessly spent nights at the other woman's house, while Aunt Annalise did whatever jobs she could to support and educate their children. Thankfully, her daughters grew up well, graduated from college, and landed jobs in reputable companies. The day her youngest daughter got accepted into college, Aunt Annalise threw the divorce papers at her husband. Aunt Annalise's husband left without a word of apology, simply declaring that he was leaving because the kids were grown, and he wouldn't be paying child support. He never looked back. Her daughters, still affected by their father's lack of affection, refused to even mention him. After that, Aunt Annalise focused solely on her daughters, and it's been a bit over a year since she started working at the restaurant. She treats her staff incredibly well, often giving unexpected bonuses that really help out with the household expenses. It angers me to think about it, leaving such a wonderful woman for a first love. As a man, it feels utterly wrong. After a few drinks, Aunt Annalise broke down, saying she felt like she had been conned. She was in her early 20s, full of energy and beauty, embarking on her first relationship and building a family, only to end up like this. Seeing Aunt Annalise cry her heart out, I didn't know what to do, but ended up holding her hand. Aunt Annalise's restaurant actually consists of 2 buildings, the main one for the restaurant and a small residential building next to it. On days she couldn't go home, she'd stay in the residential building, and sometimes the staff would rest there during breaks. I've stayed over at her place, but sometimes I slept in the residential building too. After calming down, Aunt Annalise said she was heading home, and I was getting ready to stay in the residential building. Then she came knocking, saying she had told a child younger than her own daughter everything and asked me to pretend not to know anything in the future. I agreed, of course. She wanted to go home, but felt too weak and decided to sit for a while. Having had a few relationships in college, I immediately picked up on the signs. We spent the rest of the night together. Since then, we've been exchanging meaningful glances at the restaurant, our secret known to no one. Aunt Annalise would pretend to leave work, waiting until the staff had gone, and then we'd be together in the residential building. Meeting Aunt Annalise while working part-time has been a real blessing. It's been 4 years now. I've landed a job at my desired company and work hard. On my first payday, I bought Aunt Annalise a scarf that suited her perfectly, and she smiled like a young girl, saying she felt loved. Aunt Annalise, now well into her 50s, still holds a special place in my heart as a beloved woman. With my wedding to my girlfriend 3 months away, I guess it's time to end things with Aunt Annalise, right? I'm not sure how I'll cope with missing her, the woman who matured me during my reckless 20s, but that's a worry for another day.